I'm going to start. My portion is really going to talk about financial literacy. And I wrote a book, Now What? A Practical Guide to Figuring Out Your Financial Future. And much of what I'm going to tell you is in the book. And the way that that came about was one of my daughters graduated from college and got a great job as a software engineer in Silicon Valley. So she went from being a poverty level student eating ramen noodles to a 7-page job offer, which she really didn't understand how to interpret, and a 6-figure income that she didn't know what to do with it. So she asked me for advice. I recommended several books, and she came back and said, you know, these are all for people that are much further along in their journey than I am. You should write the book. And so I did what any good dad would do, and I wrote the book. But as I was writing it, I was inspired and motivated by the other 4 kids that, you know, if I got hit by a bus tomorrow, everything that I've learned in the last 32 years would go with me. And so it became kind of a love letter to my kids. This is everything that I think you should know in order to be on firm footing. As I was doing the research, I discovered that millennials in particular have anxiety about financial issues, have anxiety about money. Less than half them don't understand how compound interest works. And many of them feel like if they knew their money was doing good, they could get behind investing. And so doing that research and making those discoveries, I kind of looked back and thought, these millennials are generally, they're becoming financially aware during the global financial crisis that we went through in 2008 and 2009. So it's really impactful. And many of us have our own experiences of what that was like. And so we have anxiety about that. And anxiety really stems from 2 things, I think: lack of understanding or lack of control. And so the idea behind financial literacy is to give you the understanding to know how to chart your path. And so the title of the book is not how to retire early, how to have $1 million, how to get rich. It's a practical guide to figuring out your financial future. So everybody on this panel and each of you have a different idea of what your financial future should be or could be. And so it's really designed to give you the steps to take. So that's really what I wanted to say about the financial literacy. And also, I said in the first chapter, I think in the book, if you don't finish the book, if you just read this chapter and you understand these 4 basic principles, you're much farther ahead than the vast majority of people. And I know that's not your motivation to be better than everybody else, but if you just understand these 4 major principles, and I think what Autumn and Dawn are going to share are going to support these principles. So the first one is really simple, and I would encourage you to write it down, but don't spend more than you make. And you think, well, that's ridiculous. I don't need to write that down. That's just common sense. But I'm telling you, we're seeing people that are spending more than they make on a regular basis. And the way that they're doing it is because they're not the federal government. They can't print new currency, but they're using credit card and debt to finance a lifestyle that they can't otherwise afford. So that's the first step. Don't spend more than you make. If you do that, you're much better off than your peers. Second, it's kind of related to that, is pay yourself first. So in the old days, you could work for a company for 30 years and you had a contract, a social contract with the company. You work for me, I'll take care of you the rest of your life, and you get to go watch a party and you get a pension for the rest of your life. That doesn't exist. I mean, that's real. It's not a fairy tale. That used to happen. So paying yourself first, you're the only person that's going to have the impact and care about you as much as you do, because nobody else will. And I hate to tell you that Social Security won't exist in the way that it is designed right now. The math doesn't support it. There are too many people drawing benefits to support it financially. So it will change in some way. So the government's not going to take care of you. Your employer is likely not going to take care of you. You need to pay yourself first. My target recommendation would be to take 15% of what you make and put that away in some type of investment. It could be into a cash, it could be into your retirement plan through work, it could be into other investments. So those are the first two rules. The third, establish an emergency fund. It's something crazy, like 70% of the US population couldn't absorb an unexpected expense of $1,000. Well, I mean, if you have kids, if you drive a car, an unexpected expense of $1,000 happens pretty frequently, right? So the vast majority of people can't cover that. And so it gets financed on a credit card. So have an adequate emergency fund. Our recommendation would be 3 to 6 months of your living expenses should be in that emergency fund. The fourth and final rule is think long-term. And I know you think, well, I'm young, I'm never going to be old like Brian, but I'm telling you, it sneaks up so fast. And you're like, oh my gosh, I've been doing this for 32 years. How did that happen? I think I just started. So thinking long-term really is beneficial. A case in point was a survey that was done by an employer-sponsored retirement plan. And what they found is when the participants used an aging app, like on Snapchat or another aging app, and they could see their future self, what they look like 30 years into the future, they increased their contributions, and more than double the people participated when they could see a fictitious picture of what they might look like in the future. It was an obligation to that future self. And so that's thinking long-term. And Einstein called compound interest the eighth wonder of the world. And it's because of thinking of the future and thinking long-term. So those are the four rules. I'm happy to go over those if anybody has any questions at the end, but I'm going to turn it over to Dawn and Autumn to cover the rest of the material. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Dawn and Autumn, take it away.
Okay, so Autumn's putting up a really fun quote that we found that we've used in the past. Too many people spend money they haven't earned to buy things they don't want, to impress people they don't like. So we got a kick out of this. I'm not sure it resonated with Shelley today, but it's so true. And to segue from Brian's 4 rules, when people ask me over the years, what are the happiest clients that we see? Hands down, the answer is people who live below their means. And in Brian's rule about don't spend more than you make and set aside 15%, he's really saying the same thing. But those are the happy people that I see. And why is that important? It's a lot less stress. It helps you navigate life easier. And Brian mentioned having kids or owning a car. We can also mention COVID-19 and a lot of other paths that we cross. It just makes life a lot easier if you're not spending everything you make. And it gives you a ton more choice when you're older. You have a lot more choice. Do I want to continue to work? Is this the job I want to do? And so it's really important to understand that, to me, is the best element that you can for self-care. So we're going to segue into self-care a little bit, because one commonality amongst every single one on the call is we're in a helping profession. And oftentimes we are the people who get the last bit of energy. So one key is, because we're in a helping profession, it's really important to learn to delegate and take care of yourself. Years and years and years ago, I used to spend about 4 hours mowing my peninsula lawn. And when I hired a guy to do it, it maybe cost me $40, and it freed up about 4 hours a week. If I dedicated those 4 hours a week to doing the work I love, it was a tremendously larger number than $40 I was paying a week. And that was one example. Another example is hiring someone to clean my house. I didn't enjoy that. I like a clean house a lot, but it made no sense for me to clean my house when I could do something I love to do, which is my work, and have someone else do something I didn't like to do and freed up my time. So the point of all that is we believe, Brian, Autumn, and I believe that it's really, really imperative to begin to delegate or outsource some of these things and craft a team to serve you, because it'll pay off profoundly well in the long run. And I know a lot of people who use a tax filer or use a fund company, and they send money in and they don't have a lot of help other than an 800 number. There's not a lot of support there. I'm really not talking about just a coach. I'm talking about crafting a team so that you get an intrinsic plan that speaks to what you want to do. So it's really important for you to craft a healthy team. And Brian's going to talk about how to begin to pick the team members later in this discussion. Autumn?
So along those lines of kind of prioritizing and knowing what's important to you, knowing how you want to spend your time, is also getting an idea of what's important to you right now and what's going to be important to you in the future. So we prioritize what's important to us by how we spend our time, but also how we spend our money. And you know, that leads to just one of the basic functions, and Brian mentioned this already, don't spend more than you earn, right? And how do you know, especially if maybe you're a business owner and cash flow is not the same every month, right? So we're talking about the word budget, right? This is cash flow planning. And the concept here, we really want to make sure that you've got some good action items to take with you. The concept here is not, you know, skip the latte and you'll be a millionaire, right? Sure, those small purchases add up, but if that's important to you, if that gives you life for the rest of the day, drink the latte, right? But take a look at what your real expenses are on a given month, and get an idea of what does it take to sustain you, and what's left over at the end of the month, if anything. There's lots of resources out there available to you for that. One of the things that we do is we've just customized a spreadsheet, and you can see here, you put your money that's coming in, your utilities, and the things that are going out, right? And in the end, hopefully there's a difference. Hopefully you got a little bit more left in the checkbook every month, right? And then you can start to kind of tell that money where to go. And what's important there is, if you know what's important to you, you know what your next action items are, right? So maybe you still have student loans that are bogging you down, right? You've got good income, but should I pay off my student loans, or should I invest? Should I add money for the future? I know compound interest is important, but how do I decide which direction is going to work for me? So getting an idea of what you have and what you owe will help you determine what's going to work for you. You know, we use a kind of a simple rule of, if the interest rate's below 5%, it's probably, and fixed, it's probably a good long-term interest rate. And don't put extra money to pay it off sooner. Look for, you know, investing and earning 8 to 10% for long-term money, right? Because the difference is your opportunity, right? So if you owe 5 and you're making 10, that's 5% extra a year in your pocket. You know, that could be an extra $500 a year, an extra $5,000 a year. So prioritizing debt payments, extra payments, that sort of thing. The other thing that it allows you to do, and we've seen this, we had young, early in their career clients who were really sure of what was important to them. They wanted healthy work-life balance. They wanted to be able to take a year off and fish and mountain bike around the country. And we worked with them based on that goal of how much do you have to have saved to make sure that you're going to meet those goals. And sometimes having that sabbatical to do the refresh allows for you to finish the second half even stronger. So making sure that you've got a good strong idea of what's important to you. Ryan talked about writing down those goals. Along the same line, a couple of years ago, I was at a conference and we did a vision board, right? And we cut out pictures of short-term goals and long-term goals. And for me, one of what was on my vision board was owning my own practice, right? So not just being an employee, but going and being an owner of a company. And so it allowed me to work towards those goals on that vision board. And that allowed me to change my budget, right? So the early in the career, getting a clear idea of what your goals are is really important. Another kind of early career goal beyond just budgeting and priorities is taking advantage of your current tax situation. So another example that we had was husband and wife, an engineer and a surgeon, who had a small 401k plan, but the husband was going back to grad school, the wife was in her fellowship program. And even though they were making a healthy income, we knew that they had a couple of things in their favor. One, they were young, which means that compound interest on that money they had a lot of time to let their investments grow. And the second part we knew is that they were probably making the least amount of money that they'd ever make in their life, right? So we knew that their taxes were going to go up. And so one of the things we did is we said, let's take advantage of this opportunity. And we converted their 401k, which just means, hey, we're going to pay taxes on this money that I have, and put it into a Roth IRA. And a Roth IRA might be something that you're not familiar with, or you may be familiar with, but basically it's an account that lets your money grow completely tax-free. And the nice part about that is when you convert it, there's no income limit to do that. So anybody can do a conversion of a Roth IRA. So they were able to take advantage of that while they were young, in the early stages of their career, pay the taxes and let the money grow completely tax-free. The exciting part of that is that it will, over their lifetime, save them probably close to $100,000 in income tax on that money. So it had a really big impact.
Okay, and one thing that we run into a lot is people are kind of eager to invest in either 401ks or IRAs. And we had a client years ago who was 42 years old, and he loved investing with us and wanted to talk investments all the time. And when we delved deeper, we realized he was a sole income earner, or at least the biggest breadwinner. His wife worked part-time in a pretty low-paid job, and they had 2 little kids. When I delved deeper into his situation, I realized he had no life insurance whatsoever, and he was 42. They were both 42. So it was a difficult decision to have, or a difficult conversation to have, but I said, hey, look, I'm not willing or interested in helping you invest anything until you address some of your needs in terms of life insurance. Because if something happens to you now, your family is going to be in a bad situation. It was kind of a difficult conversation to have. And my doorbell just rang. It was kind of a difficult conversation, but in the end, I'm really glad that we had that, because a couple of years later, maybe not even that long, he died of pancreatic cancer, and we'd written insurance and he was fully insured. So it's really important not to ignore any of the bones of good financial planning when you're putting together your plan. Now we're going to talk about some tax savvy things. And the first thing I wanted to talk about was in relationship to in the middle of your career, where do you direct money? And Autumn, you want to grab this and I'll find out who's at the door?
Nobody knows you're there, Dawn. I don't know what's going
I
on.
know. Hey, folks, I am not at home.
Yeah. Socially distancing in a warm climate. Yeah, so the idea here is to kind of look at where you are in your situation and say, okay, what opportunities are available to me right now? Obviously, we've all been taught about how valuable it is to start early when you're investing. But what happens if you didn't, right? You had big student loans, your income wasn't as high, the budget just didn't allow for it, and now you're in the middle of your career. What are some opportunities that are available to you? And we were talking kind of through some practical applications, and we had a business owner who had some pretty big business write-offs, and they were actually had some loss carry forwards, and so they didn't have a lot of income. Well, that's okay because they had saved earlier, and now we were able to do some creative things with the investments that they already had, right? Similar to our engineer, in this case, we were able to do some conversions, recognize some income, take advantage of the fact that they weren't having great years with their business, and turn it into tax-free money. And in their case, and probably in your case too, tax-free money is going to be, the special account that you're going to covet, right? This, when we look at where we are in our current tax environment, the fact that we're at really all-time low tax rates, our current tax rates are set to go up in 2026 if Congress does nothing, right? We've had a lot of stimulus. There's a lot of debt out there, change of administration. It's very likely that in the future, we'll have higher tax rates than we currently have. It's also very likely that your income is going to be higher than it is right now, okay? So if we can take advantage of that situation, pay income tax now when your rate is lower and your income is lower, let it grow tax protected and tax free so that when you take it out in the future, it comes out completely tax free. That's a huge benefit to you. It also provides you a lot of flexibility. So one of the things when we talk about mid-career, we talk about kids going off to college, right? We talk about some expenses that might pop up. Having these accounts set up for you allows you to take some distributions and make some choices and gives you some extra options available to you.
So another question we get asked frequently is in that mid-career area, should I pay off my mortgage now? And it all comes down to what is the rate of the interest that you're paying on the mortgage. But I want to give you a personal example where it really made a big difference. And the example is my poor husband. So we will have been married 43 years on Thursday. So we've been around a while. And when we were young, he was putting about $500 a month extra towards our mortgage. And we had about 20 years left on the mortgage at that time. When I realized what he was doing, I said, please don't do that. Our mortgage rate was really cheap. We knew that back then, different tax rules, but it was deductible at that time. So it was running probably a little under 3% all in. So I said, do me a favor, don't put another dime extra towards the mortgage. I'll invest that $500 a month. I did that for 20 years. It gave us almost $62,000 more in our pocket for paying attention to that little detail. So these all seem little, but they add up to big. So that's another idea to think about. Another thing we see mid-career is sometimes as people are self-employed, we've seen many examples of this, but I'll give you one. The person's self-employed, she has a retail store, she was taking money out of the till regularly and living on it and really reporting very little taxable income and really wasn't funding Social Security for herself at all. When she looked at retiring in the near future, and that was a really desirable thing for her to think about, she built a great business. But unfortunately, the valuation on the business is minuscule because she was living off the cash in the business and really not reporting anything. So she really hurt herself from a business valuation standpoint. And secondly, she decimated her Social Security in terms of lack of funding and really had nothing to show for the hard work that she put in.
Yeah, that's a great example of being tax avoidant instead of being willing to pay the taxes. You know, there's something that you give up when you avoid paying taxes, whether it's cash under the table, right? You're devaluing your business, which is one of the big assets that if you're a business owner, that's what you're building, right? Is how your brand by taking the cash position.
So another example of that is someone in late life that we worked with. And this is an interesting case also. He thought he was really clever by not really taking W-2 distributions that would have been Social Security taxable. So he was avoiding paying Social Security. And as he got closer and closer to age 60, just a few years ago, we guided him to encouraged him to pay Social Security and recognize more income. When we did the math on all of that, we figured out it would be probably about 150,000 he'd put in over a 10-year period. But the net result, because his wife did not have a job outside the home, the net result for the two of them was about 1.8 million more in their pocket if they lived 30 years. So that's another example. It seems small. He thought he was beating the system by not reporting W-2 income and focusing more on distribution income. The net result really shot himself in the foot. We did something kind of clever because his wife was younger than he. We flipped it around and made her the big income earner because she would have 10 years left before age 70. And we were able to sort of right some of the wrongs that were happening. So those are examples of what Autumn and I do on a daily basis to meet people where they're at and develop very intrinsic plans that meet their needs and take it to a much bigger level from a financial planning standpoint and get you to a much healthier place down the road.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you guys so much. On the graphic of the delayed gratification, I confess that in my 30s, that didn't speak to me. I liked gratification. I've always liked gratification. So I'm thinking a reframe of spend your money, but spend it on investments, or spend your money and spend it on a coach, or spend your money with people who can help you build wealth so that you can spend your money again. So that's my reframe on the delayed gratification. I just needed to know what to spend my money on, as opposed to what to wear, which was my favorite store. So, Brian, what can you tell us about how to select a financial advisor, which I like to think of as how do I get my money coach to help me help myself?
Sure. And I think that Dawn mentioned it earlier about having a coach and delegating and so forth. And when I started this, actually, this is the other thing I had to correct in the bio. I started my business 16 years ago, independent, and I left Morgan Stanley to start my own thing. And I figured this is the only business I'm ever going to start. and I read books about it, and that's how I learned. And then the first thing I did was hired a coach. So I've had a coach for the last 16 years, and it's made all the difference to me. And the coach that I hired, there are two distinct paths. One was just to get more income, and the other was to have more of a work-life balance. And I chose the work-life balance, and it made all the difference to me. And so choosing a financial advisor is very similar to delegating, as Dawn said. Part of the things that maybe don't bring you joy, and you know that you should, like Dawn and Autumn talked about all kinds of different ideas from various case studies. And I'm sure each of us could find something about one of you that we could improve upon. But if we don't have the chance to talk with you, we don't have the opportunity to ever bring that to your attention. So I recommend people to use an advisor, whether it's an attorney or a CPA or a financial advisor. Use somebody that's professional, that has unique insight and knowledge of tax laws and everything else that can help you, right? So when we're referring a client to an attorney, one of the things that we tell them is, this is an important relationship. It's going to be an intimate relationship. It's going to have good times and not so good times. And you have to feel comfortable with whoever you're working with, that they're going to have your best interests at heart, and that they're going to always speak with you directly and straight, right? And so choosing a financial advisor is the same thing. So if you sat down in any one of our offices and you didn't get warm fuzzies and you didn't feel like, I don't know that this is a good fit, then I would recommend that you keep moving. In fact, people that come to our office to interview us, we tell them the exact same thing. If you don't feel right about working with us, this is a really long-term relationship, we would recommend somebody else, and then we can give you names of people to work with. So in the book, I talk about some of the warning signs to know you're not in the right office. And I'm just going to go through those. One of them is that they don't listen. They're looking for a break in the conversation to talk about themselves, their process, or their strategy. And you can tell when someone is engaged with you. As a human, we've gotten much, much better at that. And you can tell if somebody is engaged or not. And if they're not listening, and this is the portion where you're dating, they're not going to listen when you're married, right? So that's a bad sign, and some time to keep moving. They don't take the time to understand your unique goals, interests, or experience. So Dawn and Autumn shared the story of the young couple that wanted to mountain bike and fish. That's so cool. Well, if you're with an advisor that doesn't value that and says, no, you have to put this money away, you have to stay on this budget and work until you're 65, because that's how we do things, then you want to move along, right? So if they're not listening to your unique interests, goals, or experiences. Service is really important, and especially in the financial services industry, it's super important. And service to me is, are they returning your calls? Are they doing what they said they're going to do? And are they treating you the way that you would want to be treated? And so if you get the impression that they're more focused on getting more and new clients and less focused on providing service, that's a sign to keep moving. You know, for example, in our practice, we're only looking to add 8 clients per year. 8, that's it. We're not trying to be everybody's financial advisor. Because we love and appreciate and respect the clients that we're working with, we don't want to do anything to jeopardize the service model that we're providing for them. So we have to limit how many we onboard each year. So that's super important. If they are name dropping clients, this violates confidentiality. This is a really sacred, it's almost like the attorney-client privilege. It's a sacred bond. If they violate that by name dropping, oh, I work with this guy or that gal, whatever, you need to turn and run. Don't be polite, don't walk, just get the hell out of there, because that's really a bad sign, because confidentiality is, as I mentioned, a cornerstone of that trusted relationship. Another sign that you may be in the wrong office is if they continue to talk over you, in terms of over your head. They're using jargon or lingo that is unique and specific to the industry. And they're trying to impress you with how smart they are and how much they know. Generally, that's a sign that they're compensating for something. It's an insecurity, and it's not going to get any better deeper into the relationship. So one of the books I read years ago was by Peter Lynch. He was the manager of Fidelity and Magellan during the 80s, the most successful mutual fund manager at that time. And he wrote a book on how to pick stocks. And he said, if you can't explain your idea to a fifth grader using a piece of paper and a crayon, then it's too complicated. Well, that stuck with me. And so we try to bring that plain spoken, clear communication to our meetings with our clients. So if they're talking over your head and using terms that you're not familiar with, that's not going to improve. And that's a sign that you may want to move along. If they have a method or they claim to have a method that is going to outperform the market, that's unique, their process is so great that it will outperform the market. Bernie Madoff had that same type of a program. And this, you can't beat the market. There isn't a system. If there was a system, they wouldn't be spending their time talking to you. They would be doing that for themselves. So that is a warning sign that you may not be in the right place. So I don't like to focus on the negatives, but it's kind of easier to see what doesn't work than what does work. And finding that right relationship is super important, whether that's attorney-client, CPA, or the financial advisor. So I don't know if that answered the question that you're looking for, Shelley, if that was helpful.
Well, I think as lawyers, we're sort of critical thinkers, so answering in the negative is probably right up our alley. So thank you very much for that.
But maybe that's why I get along with Joan, because she's always so negative.
Joan's a lawyer, by the way.
My wife, yeah.
This is a good time. If anyone has questions, if you would like to send me a chat message to Shelley Kester. I'd be really appreciative of any questions that you have that we can ask our panel. In the meantime, is 58 too late to start attacking your investment for your future?
I can answer that. So what's interesting is the case I talked about where the guy was taking distribution income and really not paying for Social Security. That guy too really hasn't invested hardly anything. And what he does have, he has a business that's not liquid. He has land that's not liquid, and he has a really nice home that's not liquid. So he's going to have to liquidate something if a life event occurs to his health or something, or if stuff comes up, he's going to have to juggle some things to come up with money to move forward. So we are able to do something that we call integrated plan design, and it allows you to building block approach to put away legally a tremendous amount of money pre-tax. I've been doing that kind of planning for about 25 years. And an example would be my own. I've done that plan for myself for a really long time. And instead of putting away just the little teeny amounts allowed in an IRA or a SEP IRA or a simple or a 401k, it allows you to legally piece together like a puzzle in a good year, especially when you have years that are just really booming, piece together these pieces to put away a lot more money and figure out how much should we do pre-tax and how much after tax. So in my life, in late career years, I'll get a range from my pension administrator, and the range is somewhere between 6 and 7 figures a year that I can put away pre-tax.
Wow.
So it's a different animal than the little simple plan IRA or 401k SEP kind of thing. So yes, we do that. It's a really cool concept. And I've done those plans for about probably 25 years. And the letter of determination is filed with the IRS. So it's all above board.
Perfect. We have a couple of questions here from other participants here. Do you have any thoughts on whole life policies as a saving option versus larger term policies for a couple at the beginning of their careers with young children?
Can I take that one?
You bet.
And Dawn would probably kick me under the table. And maybe when you come back to Traverse City, you can kick me. We sell life insurance. I'm licensed. I've been licensed for over 32 years. I think life insurance is super important, but it's also for an insurable interest, right? So while you're working, if you have debt, you want to cover that debt. If you're the primary breadwinner, you want to make sure that you provide support for your family and your spouse. So there's an insurable need during that period of time. And so it makes sense. And so usually there's a period of time that's knowable that my kids are going to age out, my debt's going to be paid down. And so a level term policy for 20 years or 25 or 30 years is really, really inexpensive and a great way to cover that and protect against that. The greater risk and the question that should be asked is disability insurance. There's a greater likelihood that you're going to be disabled, unable to perform your profession, than prematurely die. So that's a risk that I think needs to be covered and addressed more than the life insurance. But you want to do the very minimum, at least, to cover your debts and provide some remainder for the beneficiaries. So the term policy is the cheapest way to do it. The whole life policy is a great insurance product. I think it's super, but it is much more expensive. And you're paying a portion of that that's going into the cash value that's going to earn dividends, and it will grow. So you're going to be getting something out of it later on. But when you're starting out, when you're young and doing this, you don't have the extra money to put away into one of those policies. You may be better off to balance that, find balance, get a level term, and fund your retirement or fund some other investment idea outside of the whole life. And you're going to get much better returns outside of the whole life. The whole life is going to pay you maybe 3 or 4%, where the investments, as Dawn said, maybe closer to 8 or 10. So that's my take. And Dawn, you may weigh in if you have a different view.
We have a number of questions, so I'm gonna keep moving because I see at least 3 questions to get through here, and we're moving along. Sorry, Dawn. Where was that one that's, can you scroll it down? Do you have to have a significant amount of money to invest when you first start with a planner? What's the minimum recommended to start with a financial planner if you're starting out?
Autumn, you want to snag that?
Yeah. Really, it depends. It's kind of along those same dating relationship when you're talking to a financial planner. It depends on the planner you're working with. But oftentimes, I think start early makes the most sense. And so when you start early, you're not going to have a lot of money to get started with. So whether it is talking to a financial planner and making sure that your life insurance needs are taken care of, or starting with that Roth IRA. I know in our firm, we don't have minimums. We're looking for people that are engaged and as Brian said, fit with the philosophy of our firm, right? We're looking for embrace people that are willing to share and be vulnerable, educate people that are open to ideas and to be educated, and then empower people that are looking to live their best life, right? So I think in our firm, there's not a minimum. We're just looking to build. Dawn likes to use the analogy her husband gave her, who's a cherry farmer. We're planting seeds. So we want to work with all generations in our office. So.
Very cool. Here's a question. When mid-career and just starting to save, invest, when trying to balance funds to grow a business, live, buy a house, or even kids' college and savings, is there one thing to focus on first by putting the most amount towards, or is it better to diversify and put a little in each place?
I share in the book, and I firmly believe that the greatest value that a financial advisor is going to provide is not necessarily terrific insight into investments, although we can do that, but helping people to avoid mistakes and make those kinds of decisions and the priorities. And so it would be dependent. I'm not trying to dish that off, but if you have debt, that is crippling, that is preventing, you from making forward progress, that would be an area to focus on. Presuming that everything is balanced, then taking that balanced approach and doing a little bit of everything may be a good way to do it. But having a second set of eyes look at that to give you some insight to say, all right, here's the problem area. This is what we need to focus on. And these are the priorities. That's something that I think would be super important.
Thank you so much. A last question. Can you please explain any differences between an independent financial advising firm and the big names like Edward Jones or Raymond James?
Well, I can touch on that. As an independent, we're an RIA, which is a registered investment advisor, and we are fiduciary under the Securities Exchange Commission, the SEC. So we are duty bound to always have client interest first. I've never worked for one of the big names. I've always been an independent, and I've always prided myself on being able to decide what the best answer is for a client and do that instead of having the firm tell me what I need to sell, what I need to do. So that's the difference from my perspective. Autumn's worked for some big firms, so she may have a different take on that.
Yeah, there's good people in all of those places. I think when you're evaluating, you want to look at experience. A lot of times, if somebody's at a big firm, they've got good training programs, and so you can have less experience and be at a big firm and get and not hurt anybody. I think you just want to make sure that whatever advice you're given is not proprietary, right? So it's not guiding you to a name brand investment or a name brand, a name brand insurance company. So make sure that whatever solutions come out of the financial planning, it truly is independently selected and justified.
Autumn, how do you ask that without being rude? Like, how do you
You can be rude, Shelley. You can be direct. Honestly, this is your money. You need to be direct and take ownership of that meeting and ask those difficult questions. And frankly, that's why I left Morgan Stanley they had great research. They had access to great products and investment solutions, but they were leaning on us to promote the Morgan Stanley solutions. And I resented that. And my clients aren't going to be used that way. And so that's why I left. I'm also a fiduciary, and we're independent. We can go anywhere. You want Vanguard? Fine, we'll put Vanguard in there. You want American funds? We can do that. And so that independence to me is super important, that they're not beholden to any one company.
This will be our last question. And before you finish, I want to tell you all how much we've really appreciated your expertise, and you've inspired us to take care of ourselves and take care of our money. What can we expect in terms of the cost for this great help of going to a financial advisor? Will it be out of pocket cost for us? Will it come out of our investments? How do we know if we can afford the help?
In our office, it's out of your investments, and we understand small fruit, at the beginning isn't going to pay us much, but if we make a big commitment to embracing, educating, and empowering those clients, they grow into big trees, like my husband's orchard example. So we work on watering and fertilizing and pruning those trees so they grow to be a big, healthy tree. And from our perspective, that's the best way to do it. So the payment isn't hourly in our office. It really comes from the investment.
So that's one of the questions that's really important to ask when you sit down with somebody. And if you don't like the answer, that's a great reason to move on as well. We have the ability to do hourly planning, but what we've found is that percent of the investments works better for a lot of clients.
And we use all of the above. So primarily out of the investments is how people are paying for our services, but we can also do a project-based contract on a retainer. We can do hourly on a retainer, and we're actually looking into subscription services as well. So you would have access to the advice and you would pay a monthly subscription fee. So that's something that we're still working out because we want to be able to be accessible to the people that need the services and advice we have. And maybe they don't have the money yet, but they will at some point.
So I'm leaving here tonight. I'm gonna go home and talk to my husband and say, we're gonna get a coach, honey. What do I do? What's my next thing tomorrow? I pick up the phone and dial somebody, make an appointment. How do I take my know what I should do into action?
That's exactly right. You pick up the phone, and it's okay, Shelley, to interview a few people and figure out what one is the best fit for the two of you.
Very good. Thank you so much. It's been a wonderful panel. Thank you for our participants for joining us. It's been a pleasure to have you. Thank you again so very much.
Thank
Have a
you.
great evening.
Great
Bye.
pleasure. Have a good night.